What happens when one of country music's biggest stars reaches his breaking point on live television? Today, we dive into the explosive moment that reportedly led Blake Shelton to storm off. Today with Jenna and friends, leaving millions of viewers stunned and the entertainment world buzzing. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It became a clear example of how quickly things can spiral when egos clash and boundaries are crossed. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment, because the way this situation unfolded left everyone speechless. The morning began like any other on Today with Jenna and friends. Blake Shelton walked onto the set wearing his trademark grin, carrying the easygoing Oklahoma charm that made him a household name. Jenna Bush Hager greeted him warmly, and the cameras rolled as they settled into what everyone expected to be a standard promotional interview for his latest album. "It's so good to have you back on the show," Jenna said cheerfully as she adjusted her notes. "You look great. Country life seems to be treating you well." Blake chuckled as he leaned back in his chair. "Well, Jenna, you know me. I'm just a simple guy trying to make some music and enjoy life. Thanks for having me on again." At first, the conversation flowed smoothly. They discussed his new music, his life after The Voice, and his relationship with Gwen Stefani. Blake appeared relaxed, cracking jokes and sharing stories with his usual laid-back demeanor. But the tone shifted when Jenna's co-host, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly jumped into the conversation. "Blake, I have to ask," the co-host said, leaning forward with a serious expression. "There's been a lot of talk about some of your past social media comments. Some people say you've been tone-deaf on certain social issues. How do you respond to critics who believe you're out of touch with what's happening in America?" The smile on Blake's face flickered. He straightened slightly, his jaw tightening as his hands, which had been moving freely moments earlier, rested firmly on the armrests. "Well," Blake replied, his voice still controlled but edged with tension, "that's a pretty loaded question right off the bat. I've always been honest about who I am and where I come from. I'm not trying to be something I'm not." Sensing the tension, Jenna tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground, mentioning Blake's new single and the positive fan response. But the co-host wasn't ready to let it go. "I think it's important we address this," the co-host continued. "You have a platform and influence, and some people feel you haven't used that responsibly. What do you say to young fans who look up to you, but feel let down by some of your positions?" Blake's eyes narrowed, his tone sharpening. "I appreciate that you think this is important, but I came here to talk about my music, not to be ambushed about my personal beliefs. I've never claimed to be a politician or a social activist. I'm a country singer. But don't you think that with great success comes great responsibility?" The co-host pressed. "My voice matters when I'm singing," Blake shot back, his Oklahoma drawl growing more pronounced. "When I'm sitting in this chair, I'm here as an entertainer, not anyone's moral compass. And frankly, I don't appreciate being lectured about responsibility by someone who doesn't know the first thing about my life or what I stand for." Jenna quickly jumped in, attempting to calm the situation. "Blake, we're not trying to lecture you. We just want an honest conversation." Blake let out a humorless laugh. "An honest conversation would have started with letting me know this was going to feel like a trial instead of an interview about my music. An honest conversation would respect the fact that I'm here doing you a favor by promoting my album on your show." The co-host refused to back down. "Our viewers deserve to know where their favorite celebrities stand on important issues. This isn't an attack, it's accountability." "Accountability?" Blake leaned forward, his voice rising slightly. "Accountability for what? For being successful? For having opinions that don't line up with whatever narrative you're trying to push? I've never hidden who I am or where I come from." By now, the tension in the studio was impossible to ignore. Camera operators exchanged uneasy glances. Producers whispered urgently through headsets, and Jenna looked increasingly desperate to regain control. What was meant to be a light-hearted promotional interview had turned into a confrontational standoff. "Blake," Jenna pleaded, "maybe we can take a step back. We're all friends here. Let's talk about something positive. Your upcoming tour. Fans are excited." But Blake wasn't ready to let it go. You know what, Jenna? I thought we were friends too. Friends don't set each other up like this. Friends don't invite someone on their show just to blindside them with gotcha questions about things that have nothing to do with why they're here. The co-host doubled down. Blake, I think you're being a little defensive. These are legitimate questions. We're just giving you a platform to address them. Defensive? Blake stood up abruptly, his microphone pack catching slightly on the chair. You want to see defensive? This is me being as polite as I can while you sit there calling me irresponsible and out of touch. I've been nothing but respectful to this show, and this is what I get in return. The studio fell silent, broken only by the faint hum of equipment. Jenna looked mortified, realizing the interview had completely gone off the rails. The co-host, however, seemed to believe a breakthrough was happening. Blake, please sit down, the co-host said. Let's work through this. There's an opportunity here for you to connect with people who feel alienated by some of your past statements. That was the final straw. Blake's frustration turned to fury. His hands clenched at his sides as his voice dropped to a dangerous calm. Connect with people who feel alienated? He repeated. You know what alienates people? Being told what to think by talk show hosts who've never walked in their shoes. If you want to talk about being out of touch, look in the mirror. The co-host tried once more, insisting they were simply asking Blake to take responsibility for his influence. There it is again, Blake said, his voice rising. Responsibility. You keep saying it like I owe you something. My responsibility is to my family, to my fans who actually care about my music, and to myself. Not to sit here and be your political punching bag. When the co-host claimed they were just trying to have a meaningful conversation, Blake laughed bitterly. Meaningful, he said. You think ambushing someone on live television and lecturing them is meaningful? Lecturing someone about responsibility isn't meaningful. This isn't journalism, and it isn't even good television. This is just an attempt to feel important by tearing someone else down. Jenna made one final, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. She urged Blake to take a breath, suggesting they may have gotten off on the wrong foot and could still turn things around. She reminded him that fans loved him and that the show valued having him there. But Blake was already reaching for his microphone pack, his movements sharp and deliberate. You know what, Jenna, he said. I used to think you were different. I thought you genuinely cared about your guests as people, not just as opportunities to score points or create drama for ratings. Jenna protested, her voice cracking, insisting that wasn't what the show was about. Blake challenged her, his eyes blazing as he looked between her and the co-host. Then explain to me why I walked in here thinking I was going to talk about music and instead got treated like I was running for office. Explain why every question was designed to make me look bad or put me on the defensive. The co-host interrupted again, suggesting Blake was being overly sensitive and that any public figure should be prepared to answer tough questions. Blake froze and stared in disbelief. Overly sensitive? He asked. Did you just call me overly sensitive for not wanting to be ambushed on your show? The co-host responded coldly, saying that if Blake couldn't handle tough questions, maybe he shouldn't be doing interviews at all. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the studio seemed to hold their breath. When Blake finally spoke, his voice was deadly calm. He explained that he had been doing interviews for over 20 years and had answered questions about everything from his divorces and personal struggles to politics and relationships. He had always done so honestly and respectfully, because that's what professionals do. But what you're doing, he continued, stepping closer, his voice rising, isn't asking tough questions. You're trying to create a moment. You're trying to get a reaction. You're trying to make me lose my cool so you can get a viral clip. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. Jenna tried to stop him, but Blake raised a hand. No, Jenna, I'm done. I came here in good faith to promote my music and maybe have some fun with people I thought were my friends. Instead, I've been treated like some kind of villain who needs to be taken down a peg. He began walking toward the edge of the set, pulling off his microphone pack. You want to know what's really irresponsible? He said. using your platform to attack people instead of celebrating them, forgetting that the person sitting across from you is a human, being with feelings, not just content for your show. The co-host called after him, accusing Blake of running away and challenging him to stay and defend his positions. Blake stopped and slowly turned around. His expression was a mix of hurt, anger, and disgust. "Defend my positions?" he repeated quietly. To who? Someone who already made up their mind about me before I even walked in? Someone who thinks their job is to be judge, jury, and executioner instead of just asking questions and listening? He shook his head and laughed bitterly. The real problem isn't that I won't defend my views. It's that you never had any intention of listening to them. You just wanted to trap me, make me look bad, and score your points. Jenna was now visibly emotional, tears forming as she pleaded with Blake not to leave. For a brief moment, his expression softened. "I know you didn't want this, Jenna," he said quietly. "But this is what happens when you let people with agendas hijack your show, when guests stop being people and start being political targets." He looked back at the co-host with open contempt. "And whatever you think you accomplished today, I hope it was worth it. You just burned a bridge with someone who has always shown this show nothing but respect." The co-host still insisted Blake was overreacting, claiming they had only asked questions viewers wanted answered, or questions you wanted to ask because you thought it would make good television. Blake snapped. "There's a big difference between serving your audience and serving your own ego." He turned toward the exit, then stopped and looked directly into the camera. "I think the people watching at home deserve to know what really happened today. I came here to talk about music, to share stories, to make people smile. Instead, I was lectured about responsibility by people who think tearing others down is their job." His eyes locked onto the camera with intense focus. If you've ever felt like the media doesn't represent you fairly, like it's more interested in creating drama than listening, then you just watched that happen in real time. The co-host shifted uncomfortably, realizing Blake had taken control of the narrative. When they attempted to push back, Blake turned toward them again. "You want to talk about fair?" he said. "Fair would have been telling me before we went on air that this interview was going to be political. Fair would have been showing me the same respect I've always shown this show." He gestured around the set. "I've been coming here for years. I've promoted albums, shared personal stories, and tried to be genuine because I thought that's what you wanted. But what you really wanted was a chance to take me down." Jenna was now openly crying as the moment collapsed in real time. Jenna's carefully applied makeup began to run as she watched her show collapse in real time. Her voice trembled as she looked at Blake and said she truly had no idea this was going to happen. She insisted she never would have allowed it if she had known. Blake's expression softened as he listened, and for a brief moment it looked like he might sit back, down and try to salvage the situation. "Jenna, I believe you," Blake said quietly. "I really do. But that actually makes this worse. It means someone on your own team thought they could use your show to ambush me without even telling you." He glanced around the studio, taking in the stunned faces of the crew, the frantic whispers between producers, and the overwhelming sense of chaos his confrontation had unleashed. He shook his head slowly. "This is what happens when people forget what television is supposed to be about," he said. "It's meant to entertain, to bring people together, to make their day a little brighter. Instead, it turns into division, into gotcha moments, and forcing people to choose sides." The co-host, seemingly unable to read the room, made one final attempt to defend their position. They argued that Blake was being unfair to the viewers, insisting the audience was intelligent enough to handle complex conversations about serious issues. Blake stared at them for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weary disappointment that felt even heavier than his earlier anger. "You're right about one thing," he said. "The viewers are smart enough to see exactly what you tried to do here. Smart enough to know the difference between a genuine conversation and a calculated attack." He began walking toward the exit again, continuing to speak as he moved. They're also smart enough to understand that when someone invites you onto a show to talk about your music and then spends the entire time trying to make you look like a bad person, that says far more about the show than it does about the guest. Jenna called out to him desperately, begging him not to leave and asking if they could start over. Blake paused at the edge of the set and turned back one last time. The anger had drained from his face, replaced by something closer to sadness, almost pity. "I have nothing but respect for you personally, Jenna," he said. "But this isn't about you and me. This is about what your show has become, and what television becomes when hosts start acting like prosecutors instead of interviewers." He looked directly at the co-host again. "And as for starting over," he continued, "some things can't be undone. Some bridges, once burned, don't get rebuilt. You made your choice about what kind of show you wanted today, and I'm making mine about whether I want to be part of it." The co-host made one final attempt to preserve some dignity, urging Blake to reconsider and suggesting they could still have a productive conversation. Blake actually smiled, but it wasn't a warm one. "A productive conversation?" he said. "After spending the last 20 minutes trying to paint me as a villain? With someone who thinks ambushing guests is good television? I don't think so." He took a few more steps toward the exit, then stopped and addressed the camera one final time. "To anyone watching who's ever been a fan of my music, who's ever enjoyed a song, come to a concert, or just had a good time listening to country music, this isn't about you," he said. "This is about a media culture that's forgotten how to treat people with basic decency and respect." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "I'll keep making music because that's what I love. I'll keep performing because I love connecting with people who appreciate what I do. But I won't keep subjecting myself to this kind of treatment from people who think their platform gives them the right to attack anyone who doesn't fit their narrative." Jenna made one final plea, promising that if Blake stayed, they could fix everything and have the conversation he came to have. Blake looked at her with genuine sadness. "The conversation I came here for was about music, about joy, about sharing something positive," he said. That conversation ended the moment this turned into a political inquisition. He glanced at his phone briefly. "I've got a studio session this afternoon with people who actually want to hear what I have to say, not what they think I should say. I've got fans coming to my shows who want to sing along, not debate my politics. That's where I belong." As he turned to leave, the co-host still couldn't resist one final comment, urging Blake to think about how his words and actions affected others. Blake stopped in his tracks. The entire studio went silent, expecting another explosion. Instead, he spoke calmly without turning around. "You want to know what really affects people?" he said. "Treating them like human beings instead of political targets, showing respect instead of tearing them down for ratings, building people up instead of looking for ways to make them look bad." He turned around one last time. "Maybe you should think about how your words and actions affect others, because today they cost this show a guest who always tried to be professional and respectful." With that, Blake Shelton walked off today with Jenna and friends, leaving behind a stunned studio, a devastated host, and a co-host who finally seemed to grasp the weight of what had just happened. The cameras lingered for a few painful seconds, capturing Jenna's tears and the heavy silence, before finally cutting to commercial. What began as a routine promotional interview ended as one of the most uncomfortable moments the show had ever aired.